I'm going to show you how to conduct a professional interview on your live video or podcast by following a very simple two-step framework. The first is your charisma and the second is your content. And if you follow this framework every single time, well, it's like muscle memory. And eventually you're going to get so good at interviewing people that your guests will compliment you and they will recommend their friends, which will bring higher level guests onto your show, and that's when you really start to grow. So we're going to jump into this framework right now. Hey, welcome back to BeLive TV, where business owners and entrepreneurs build the dream with live stream. I'm your host, Owen Video. Good to have you here. If it's your first time here, say hello in the comment section below. So let's dig into this two-part framework where part one is your charisma. Okay, and that's actually how you appear on camera. It's how you ask questions. It's what you look like when you are listening to your guests answer the questions. And that's part one. We're going to cover that first. And then I'm going to go into the content. And I'm going to give you a list of the only 7 questions that you should ever ask anyone on an interview. And if you follow that framework, eventually you kind of massage it a little bit and make it your own. You are going to be so good at getting the best out of your guests that your show will explode. Okay, so let's talk about charisma first. And I'm going to go through sort of a list of rules here that you need to follow to make sure that your attitude on screen when you're interviewing a guest is just on point, okay? So the first rule is always prep your guest. There are no excuses, okay? Never surprise a guest or leave them in the dark about something. We hate this. I never want to be surprised by you. In fact, there was this time that I was doing an interview on a podcast with somebody, and the podcast guest prepared me for A. He's like, I'm going to ask you questions on A, B, C, and D. And I'm like, it's great. It'll make me look good. This is a good use of my time. And then when we got on air, he completely switched it over and instead began to coach me on air, which obviously I'm not going on your podcast so that you can look amazing. I'm going on your podcast so that I can look amazing. Okay? So never ever surprise your guest with surprise questions. Always have a question plan in front of you so that your guest looks amazing. Tip number 2 is short bios. Keep your bios super short. So when you're introducing your guest, it's like, hey, I want to introduce my guest who has done A, has done B, and has done C. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Jim Jones. And you're done, right? Never read the bio they send you. That's designed largely for like a program in a speaking bureau or at a conference. Never ever read the bio. Pick 3 bullet points out and introduce them shortly. Your audience is not interested in all that. They just want to get to the guest. Okay, so get to it. Charisma rule number 3, never interrupt a guest. Ugh, I hate this. I truly hate this. When the interviewer asks me a question and then like interrupts me with like, oh, I did that too. I did that too. Like, stop with all that. It's your show. Right? You're already the star, and you have them on to make them king for a day or queen for a day. Never interrupt your guest or jump all over them with your Me Too statements. And this can be a challenging thing to do, and it leads us into our tip number 4, which is never Me Too your guest. Okay? What that means is when you Me Too is when you're interviewing your guest, and you ask them a question and they start to humble brag, right? They're like, well, when I made my first $1 million and I did this and I did this. And so your brain goes, everyone's gonna love my guest and they're not gonna love me. And so you interrupt, breaking rule 3, and then you start to Me Too, which is rule number 4, right? And you go, I did that once and my experience was blah, 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 right? Your show, your live video podcast is all about you. So you're gonna get plenty of opportunity to do that. You need to now give your guest an opportunity to talk about what they're experiencing. I was recently a guest on someone else's podcast, and as I began to explain, my success on YouTube, they immediately went into, yeah, we do that too, and we do that too. And then I went to their channel, they had like 14 views, and it's just, it devalues your guest, right? So don't Me Too your guest. As your guest is sort of like humble bragging, be amazed. Be amazed by it. Be like, oh, that's awesome. Radical, man. Well, congrats. That's a great word to learn, by the way, is congrats. Great way to carry yourself on an interview. Okay, all right, so tip number 5, resting happy face. This is big, resting happy face. When you ask a question to your guest, be sure to smile. So, how long have you been in the XYZ business? And then when you pause to listen to the answer, have a resting happy face. Look at the camera and nod. Right? Now, you might, like I've got my laptop here, like your guest might actually be on the laptop here, but you're gonna look at the camera because otherwise this is what the audience sees. The audience sees you looking down, even though you're looking directly at your guest. You wanna look directly at the camera and go, because your guest is gonna be probably looking at the camera as well. And so it gives this great eye contact thing, and you need to be really conscious of how you look on camera. Because if you ask your guest a question, you're like, so how long have you been in XYZ business? And then you start sort of like dabbling with your desk and playing with your audio and sort of things, the audience sees you and they start to think that this content is not valuable, okay? So have a resting happy face. Have a resting face where you know you're engaged and you look like you're engaged in this interview, okay? So that's part 1. We just covered the rules of charisma, and you want to follow those rules. Those are that's like etiquette, basic fundamental stuff. Now let's move over into the actual interview and the content of this interview. So this is part 2 of the framework. Now, the first rule is to present your guest professionally. So key, and BeLive is the best at this, okay? Be.live is a live streaming software where you can invite your guests to join you in a private meeting room called the staging area. That's down here, where you can prepare them and you can test their camera and their mic before going live. Now, this is a huge feature because you can't do this on Facebook Live or YouTube Live by itself, right? With BeLive, you can actually make sure that the mic works and that the camera works, so you're not doing this, are you there? Are you there? Are you there? Are you there? It makes your guest look like an idiot, makes you look like an idiot, okay? So get all that done in BeLive first. Now, when you go live, you can actually keep the guest in the lobby so the audience doesn't see them, and then you can bring them into the live stream by clicking on the red button here. Now, when you're both live, you can split the screen with them just like this. Tip number 2 is pick the right guest. Now stick with me because I'm gonna share with you the 7 questions that you should ask every person, but you have to have the right sort of atmosphere for that as well. And so you need to pick guests that are relevant to your topic. It's very easy to invite guests onto the show that are your friends or that are people that will say yes, but you're gonna spend all of your energy connecting their weird content to your platform, when instead you need to just focus on guests that are relevant to your industry. Okay, so that's number 1. And number 2 is find experienced guests. It's so challenging to all of a sudden become a media coach and a technology coach to someone who just doesn't know how to go live or how to do a podcast interview, right? Think about that. You ask someone to be a guest and they're like, well, I don't really have a microphone, I never been on the webcam before, and maybe they are. Maybe they're like an industry recognized celebrity, but if they're not ready to go live, then put them on your show 2-3 months from now and give them time to get a webcam, get a camera, because otherwise they're gonna look foolish and they're gonna blame you. They're not gonna blame themselves, they're gonna blame you, okay? So pick the right guests, make sure that they're relevant to your topic, make sure that they're experienced. Okay, so now, let's talk about the 7 questions that you should prepare for your interview. This is the content framework of your interview, okay? The questions that you need to ask should prepare your guest for a home run. Now, it's gotta be questions that they can just knock out of the park, give your audience a ton of value, and should never surprise them, right? You don't want gotcha moments. Like, gotcha, ha, I asked you about your divorce, right? And they're crying, dude, don't do that, right? This is not like hardcore journalism. You want to do maybe you're going to get into hardcore journalism, but you want your guests walking away going, wow, that was great. Wow, you really made me look great, okay? So here is the format, okay? Your first 2 questions are groundwork questions, and they lay the foundation, okay? These are high-level staging questions so that we understand who we're talking to. And here's the basic format. It's like big question number 1, and then a couple of follow-up questions, if they're needed. And then big question number 2, and then a couple of follow-up questions. Now, these should be high-level questions just to get the ball rolling, okay? So you're gonna do your bio, and then you're gonna open up with like, well, tell us how you achieved your success, right? Really, really high level. Another question you could ask is, tell us, how did you get to this point where you are today, okay? Or you could say something like, what were your biggest wins in your life, in your business career? And you're asking real high-level questions so they can give you some background and maybe a couple of follow-up questions. And follow-up questions are just a little bit more about detail to keep the audience engaged. So you might want to say, oh, and what age were you when that happened? Or was this before or after you wrote the book? And things like that, okay? So this is to get the ball rolling, get them started on a home run, so they're bragging about themselves and they're enjoying your time. And that's when you move into the big 3 questions, okay? So are you still with me? If you're still with me, type a comment into the comment section right now. Let me know that you're still with me. I'll be sure to come back and answer all the comments, okay? So one of the big failures in interviews, and believe me, I coach people on how to do this. This is a big problem, is they're boring, right? Just like boring. This happens when you try to focus in on too much stuff, and it just becomes this one big, cluster mess of your questions and your Me Too statements and all this kind of stuff. So you got to get away from that. So you want to ask these 2 opening questions and then 3 big meaty questions that we call the big 3, okay? And here are the 3 questions that every interview needs to ask, and we call these yellow brick road questions, okay? Because they take us on a journey. They actually help to lay the framework, okay? So the first question is, what is X and why do we need it? Okay, and you fill this in with whatever their platform is, right? If they're like a Pilates instructor, you say, so what is Pilates and why do we need it? Okay, this is a big softball pitch and allows them to hit a home run, but it also lays the foundation for the remaining questions, okay? So it's like Oz, right? So what is Oz and why do we need to get there, right? That's why we call them yellow brick road questions. Question number 2 is, how do we get from X to Y, and what are the biggest struggles that we can expect? Okay, so how do we go from Munchkin Land to the land of Oz, and what are the troubles that we can expect? It's like, well, you got to follow the yellow brick road. You're gonna deal with the Wicked Witch and her monkeys, right? You're gonna meet a scarecrow. You're gonna meet a cowardly lion and the field of poppies and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so you're giving your interviewer a chance to kind of really like lay out the journey for the listener. Now, question number 3 is, now once there, what can we expect? And I love this question because it puts the listener in a place of success. It puts the listener in a place where they're like already imagining themselves in the land of Oz, right? In this place of success. And you're asking, well, what can we expect once we get there? And your guess is like, more money, more problems, right? You're laying the groundwork there. So those are your big 3 questions. And then you're gonna look at them, you're gonna smile, you're not gonna Me Too them, right? And then you're gonna finally close the interview. Don't babble, and don't do this thing we do on our cell phones. We're like, okay, I gotta go, bye. Okay, see you later, bye, 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 bye now. Don't do that. It's completely ridiculous. When the interview is over, it should be over, done, and your audience should actually be like, whoa, what just happened, right? The second you say, let's wind down, or the second you say, in conclusion, people are gonna X out. They're just, oh, it's over now, no more content, done. So don't linger over it, just wrap it up and move on. And I like to do this with 2 final closing questions. Number 1 is, so you've already gone through the 3 yellow brick road questions, okay? And now you're wrapping it up and you go, so tell us, what's the biggest lesson that you learned that you want everyone to walk away with, okay? This is really like a summary, but you're not saying summary because that cues your audience to leave. And then the question number 2 is, how can we stay in touch with you? And that's the big, like, we're done now question, right? So you say, how can we stay in touch with you? Right? And LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all these different things. and you say, great, hey, thanks for joining us today, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next week, right? And you're done. You're done with the show. Now, some additional ideas is create a prep sheet. When you book your guest, let them know the 7 questions you're gonna ask. Do not surprise them. And I've heard live streamers say, oh, I like to do improv. I like to improv with my people. Don't do that. It's such a newbie mistake, right? Because guests don't want to be surprised. I mean, if you got a whole like show where it's like, hey, we surprise our guests and we do gotcha moments, then that's one thing. But if you're just not preparing questions because you don't want to prepare questions, or you never had a model, well, now you have a model, right? Just follow this model, okay? And you will do just fine. Now, if you want to learn even more about how to grow your business and how to become the world's greatest entrepreneur, then watch our next video in your screen right now. Don't leave the channel. We've got tons of great content coming up. Just click on this video now. We'll see you there. I'm Owen Video for BeLive TV, and I'll see you next time.